Hey everyone, today we're going to be installing a pair of upper control arms for an 05 Plus Tacoma on our 2019 TRD Pro Tacoma.
With the vehicle safely supported, remove the front wheel. Using a trim removal tool, unclip the rubber fender covers from the inner fenders to allow better access to the upper control arm pivot bolt. Use a screwdriver to open the two ABS sensor clamps on the upper control arm so the ABS sensor wire is freely hanging. Remove the upper control arm ball joint cotter pin and castle nut. It's a good idea to keep the castle nut on the last few threads of the ball joint to prevent the upper control arm from flying up when the ball joint is removed from the spindle. Separate the upper control arm ball joint from the spindle using a pickle fork or by hitting the flat spot on the front of the spindle with a large hammer. Remove the upper control arm pivot bolt nut and washer using a 19mm wrench or socket. If necessary, gently bend the brake line away from the nut to allow easier access to the nut. As you're removing the upper control arm pivot bolt by sliding it forwards towards the front of the truck, it may be necessary to bend the inner fender out of the way to remove the bolt. Pay attention to all wires and hoses behind the inner fender when trying to bend the fender out of the way. On some models, it may be necessary to unbolt or unclip electrical wires in the engine bay that are in the way of the pivot bolt. Once the pivot bolt is removed, remove the upper control arm. Install the provided grease zerks into the All-Pro upper control arm, making sure to point the zerks towards the uniball side of the upper control arm. It is acceptable for the zerks to be tight before bottoming out on the upper control arm sleeves as long as they are pointed towards the uniball. Install the new upper control arm using the factory pivot bolt and the provided washers on each side of the bushings. When installing the new upper control arm, the straight tube should be towards the rear of the truck with the uniball cup oriented as shown. It may be necessary to use a pry bar to slightly spread the sides of the upper control arm to install the rear inner washer. Once the pivot bolt is all the way through the upper control arm, put a new washer and the stock nut back on the pivot bolt and snug the nut. Before fully tightening the nut, grease the upper control arm bushings using a grease gun on the zerks already installed on the upper control arm until grease comes out between the bushings and the washers. Wipe any excess grease off the upper control arm. Using the provided high misalignment spacers and hardware as shown, bolt the upper control arm to the spindle. The shorter misalignment spacer should be inserted in the top of the uniball and the longer one in the bottom of the uniball. Using a screwdriver or extension, it may be necessary to align the lower misalignment spacer with the hole in the spindle. Once the misalignment spacer is inserted into the top of the spindle, insert the provided 9/16 bolt through the top of the uniball and then tighten the provided washer and locking nut. Torque the 9/16 12-point bolt to 81 foot-pounds. Next, torque the upper control arm pivot bolt nut to 85 foot-pounds. At this point, reinstall any electrical connectors that were previously disconnected. Make sure that all mounting bolts and plastic snaps are reinstalled. Use the zip tie to secure the ABS wire to the tab on the rear of the upper control arm. Apply the All-Pro decal to the outer side of the upper control arm tube. Finally, secure the inner fender covers using the existing plastic snaps. Before you hit the road, be sure to take your vehicle to an alignment shop and get it professionally aligned. Failure to do so may result in premature tire wear and suspension damage.
We hope this video was helpful in the installation of your All-Pro upper control arms. For more products, go to allprooffroad.com. One shot wonder. Money. Ready for my close-up.
Oh yeah, look at that sexy upper control arm. Oh yeah. Do some slow jams music on there.